Hey, campfire crew. Let's get it on.
Who is it, dear?
There's a young man here. He says there's been an accident. He wants to use the telephone.
Well, I suppose you better let him in.
Prank Gone Wrong, submitted by Michael B. I grew up outside Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, in one of those little mountain communities where everybody knows everybody, and everybody grows up in the woods. The Appalachian Trail cuts right through that area, and growing up there, we heard stories constantly. Some serious, some crazy. I had relatives that told stories about hearing weird screams in the mountains at night, and hikers claiming they'd seen giant footprints in the muddy creek beds. And of course, all the old-timers swear there's something living deep in the forest that people aren't supposed to find. When I was 17, I thought all of it was bullshit. My best friend Tyler and I spent most of that summer trying to entertain ourselves any way we could. There was plenty to do where we lived, mostly fishing, hiking, partying in the woods, or just driving around back roads listening to music. But every once in a while, we did get bored. Tyler's uncle Rick was obsessed with military gear and hunting equipment, and one night while we were hanging out in his garage, Tyler found an old ghillie suit stuffed in a storage bin. The thing looked insane. It was covered head to toe in shredded strips of green and brown fabric, like a walking pile of leaves. Tyler pulled it on, and I could barely tell there was even a person inside it. But the second I saw him wearing it, I started laughing. And Tyler said, "You know what we should do with this?" I already knew. As I mentioned, the AT passed about 2 miles away from our house, and early June was always busy with hikers moving through Harper's Ferry. Some were trying to complete the entire trail, and others were just backpackers spending weekends in the mountains. Either way, plenty of people hiked after sunset trying to reach shelters before dark. Tyler wanted to hide near the trail and scare people. And at 17, that sounded like the funniest thing we could possibly do. We spent 2 days planning everything out. Tyler knew a narrow stretch of trail running along a ridge where hikers had to squeeze between giant rocks and thick patches of mountain laurel. There weren't many places to step off the path right there, so if somebody suddenly saw what looked like a creature standing up from the bushes at dusk, they'd probably lose their minds, which is what we were banking on. That Friday night, Tyler texted me around 5 saying that his parents had left to go drink with some friends. My parents were off doing something too. So I got all my gear together, went over to his house with a flashlight, some snacks, and 2 walkie-talkies stuffed into my backpack. When I met Tyler behind his garage, he was already wearing the ghillie suit, and I nearly fell over laughing. In the late daylight, he didn't look human. The hanging camouflage strips were swaying in the breeze, making him look like some kind of forest creature. "Dude, you look fucking ridiculous," I said. And he just said, "Perfect." The woods behind our houses were damp from rain earlier that afternoon, and everything smelled like wet dirt and leaves. We started walking, and the deeper we walked into the forest, the darker it became until our flashlights had to be turned on. You know how it gets so dark in the forest at dusk. By the time we reached the AT, it was closer to 7:30. So we settled near the rocky choke point Tyler had picked out earlier that week. The forest around us was unbelievably quiet, except for a little bit of wind moving through the treetops. So we crouched in the bushes, whispering and waiting for hikers to come through. About 10 minutes later, we heard voices. 2 hikers appeared around the bend with their trekking poles, and they looked exhausted. Probably trying to reach the next shelter before stopping for the night. So Tyler crawled into the brush beside the trail while I hid uphill behind a tree trying not to laugh. As the hikers passed, Tyler slowly stood up from the bushes without making a sound, and one of the hikers screamed instantly. The other guy stumbled backwards so fast he nearly fell off the trail, so Tyler took 2 slow steps towards them with his arms slightly out, looking like some kind of monster climbing out of the woods. The hikers panicked and sprinted down the trail yelling curses behind them while I nearly suffocated trying not to laugh out loud. Once they were out of sight, Tyler pulled back the hood and started cracking up too. "That was amazing," he whispered. About 20 minutes later, we scared another hiker, this time a guy walking alone. Tyler hid beside a large boulder and jumped out growling as the man passed. And this poor guy dropped a flashlight he was already carrying and ran down the trail without even looking back. That should have been enough for us. We should have just gone home right then. But not long after the second prank, something changed in the woods. And at first I didn't notice it. Tyler and I were still joking around quietly when we realized the forest had gone completely silent. No frogs, no crickets, nothing. The silence felt wrong immediately. The kind of silence where your body reacts before your brain catches up. Tyler noticed it too. And then he said, "You hear that?" Before I answered, a loud cracking noise echoed from somewhere uphill in the woods, like someone smashing a baseball bat against a tree trunk. A few seconds later, there was another knock answered from farther away. The hair stood up on my arms, and I whispered, "What the hell is that?" Tyler shrugged, but I could see he was nervous. And then we heard the scream. I still can't fully describe it. It wasn't a coyote or a fox or anything normal. It sounded deep and guttural, kind of human but not quite. Whatever it was, the noise rolled through the mountains with a horrible angry tone buried inside it, and hearing it made my stomach tighten up. Everything faded into silence again, and Tyler forced out a laugh, saying, "Probably one of those people getting us back." But neither of us deep down believed that. I suddenly had an overwhelming feeling that we shouldn't be out there anymore. "We need to go, man," I said, and Tyler didn't argue. We packed up our stuff quickly and started hiking back through the woods towards home. The moon was barely reaching through the thick canopy overhead by now, and our flashlights were bouncing across tree trunks and patches of underbrush while leaves crunched underneath us. About 10 minutes into our walk, we heard footsteps behind us. Heavy footsteps. We both stopped walking, and the footsteps stopped coming too. I turned my flashlight toward the darkness behind us, but all I could see were endless trees. And then the smell hit us. It was unbelievable. Rotting garbage mixed with wet dog and sewage. The odor was so strong it made us both gag. "What is that?" Tyler whispered. But before I could answer, something huge moved between the trees behind us. At first I thought it was a bear standing upright, but then it stepped partially into the moonlight, and my entire body locked up. The thing had to have been 9 feet tall. Dark brown hair covered its entire body in thick matted patches, and its shoulders were unbelievably wide. The face of it looked almost human, but the proportions were wrong, and the eyes reflected white in our flashlight beams. I can't really describe the face totally because it was just moonlight bouncing off of it. But for 1 second, it stared directly at us. And then it screamed. The sound exploded through the woods so violently I felt it in my chest. And it wasn't just loud. There was rage behind it. "Run!" Tyler yelled, and we took off downhill through the trees. Behind us came crashing footsteps so massive it sounded like a truck tearing through the forest. Branches snapping everywhere, small trees cracking apart, then the creature screamed again somewhere close behind us. I looked back once and immediately regretted it. This thing was charging after us on 2 legs, and it moved so fast for something so huge. It barreled right through saplings without slowing down, just knocking them to the side, and I watched one thin tree literally snap in half as this creature crashed through it. Tyler was up ahead of me, pieces of the ghillie suit ripping off on branches as he ran. But then something slammed into the ground beside me. A huge branch. This thing was chasing us, but now it was throwing things at us too. "Move, man, move!" Tyler screamed. And we tore downhill through briars and rocks, slipping on the wet leaves, my lungs burning so badly I thought I was going to collapse. But adrenaline kept my legs moving. The screams kept coming behind us, and every time the creature yelled, it echoed throughout the mountains. At one point, Tyler tripped crossing a creek and hit the ground hard, and I grabbed his arm and yanked him up while he was just swearing his head off in panic. That's when I saw the creature clearly again. It was standing maybe 30 yards away in the trees, chest heaving heavily. One massive hand was holding a broken tree limb thicker than my leg. And that's when I saw it peel its lips back, revealing these huge yellow teeth. Then it slammed the branch against a nearby tree trunk with unbelievable force, and the crack echoed like a gunshot. We ran harder than I thought humanly possible, and we finally saw lights from Tyler's neighborhood glowing faintly through the woods ahead. The creature screamed again, and we burst through the tree line into Tyler's backyard and just collapsed on the grass, gasping for air. Behind us, the forest edge shook as something massive stopped just inside the trees. We didn't move. We just lay there like slugs. The woods went silent again except for our breathing, and then from the darkness came one low growl. It wasn't a scream, and it wasn't loud. It was almost like a warning. A few minutes later, we heard heavy footsteps retreating deeper into the woods, and Tyler and I stayed in that yard for another 20 minutes before either of us could even speak. The ghillie suit was shredded to pieces, and my arms and face were covered in cuts from branches. And finally, Tyler rolled over, looked at me, and said, "You saw it too, right?" And I nodded. The next morning, we went back looking for one of the walkie-talkies that Tyler had dropped near the creek, and we didn't get far before finding footprints in the mud. Huge footprints, human-shaped but far too large to belong to any person. The same kind of footprints that 2 days ago I would have laughed at had you told me you had seen them yourself. Beside one of the tracks was a clump of reddish-brown hair caught on a broken branch, and we just left. Tyler got rid of the ghillie suit in his backyard that night, and neither of us ever tried scaring hikers again. And to this day, I won't hike the Appalachian Trail outside Harper's Ferry after dark. My Mom's House, submitted by Callahan J. My mother died in late October after a long battle with dementia, and by the time the funeral was over, my wife Allison and I were emotionally drained, to say the least. The last few years had been rough, and my mom had insisted on staying in her house, even after her memory started going. She absolutely refused assisted living, refused home nurses most days, and somehow did manage to survive alone far longer than she should have. After she passed, the responsibility of cleaning out the house and getting it ready to sell fell entirely on me. I dreaded going back to the house. It sat at the end of a gravel road surrounded by woods. It was the same place that I'd grown up. And as a kid, it had always felt warm and welcoming. But when Allison and I pulled into the driveway a cold November morning, the place already looked wrong somehow. The curtains in the front living room were open, even though I clearly remembered closing them after the funeral, and one of the porch chairs had been moved to the opposite side of the deck. At first I figured maybe one of my cousins had stopped by after we had left and forgot to mention it. But still, the second I unlocked the front door, I got a strange feeling in my stomach. The air inside smelled awful. Not like rot, but like burnt grease and spoiled food. But there was also another odor underneath it all, something sour that reminded me of a dirty locker room. Allison wrinkled her nose immediately and said, "What is that smell?" I shrugged and stepped inside and said, "Could be anything. Maybe we left food out after the funeral, and maybe Mom left something out before she got sick." But as we walked through the house, the more things started bothering me. Furniture, it seemed, had been rearranged slightly. The recliner in the den sat at a different angle than I remembered, and kitchen drawers were partially open. A lamp in the upstairs hallway had been moved from one table to another, but none of it was dramatic enough to immediately scream danger. But altogether, it created a weird feeling that somebody had been touching everything. My wife noticed it too. "Are you sure nobody's been out here?" I said, "I don't think so." But suddenly I wasn't confident anymore. I made a few texts to my cousins, but no one responded right away. The two of us spent most of the afternoon cleaning things up, and I was boxing up old clothes while Allison was working in the kitchen, sorting dishes and throwing out expired food and stuff. Every once in a while, though, I caught strange smells drifting through the house, almost like somebody had recently cooked meat. Around noon, I opened the refrigerator and found several food containers that I didn't recognize sitting behind some old soda cans. One of them held moldy noodles that definitely hadn't been there when Mom was alive. Mom was gluten-free. She couldn't even eat those. That was the first moment I felt genuinely uneasy. Then we heard the noise downstairs. It sounded like something scraping across the concrete floor. Allison looked up from the kitchen table immediately and said, "Did you hear that?" And I nodded slowly. The sound came again, a soft dragging noise beneath the floorboards underneath us. I got up and went to check the basement while Allison stood at the top of the stairs. The basement itself was unfinished, mostly concrete walls packed with old shelves, Christmas decorations, tools, the kind of stuff old ladies have hanging around. I looked everywhere in every corner, but nothing looked out of place. I didn't hear anything moving around, and I even checked behind the furnace and water heater before heading back upstairs, feeling stupid for being nervous. We tried brushing it off after that, but the mood in the house changed completely. By late afternoon, neither of us was talking much anymore, and every creak made us stop what we were doing. Every little noise sounded amplified. And outside, darkness was settling over the house early. By 6 o'clock, the house felt isolated and claustrophobic. A wind had picked up and was rattling dead branches against the siding, while Allison steadily packed dishes into boxes near the kitchen. I was upstairs cleaning out my old bedroom when I heard a loud thump beneath me. Then another. These were not random house noises this time. It sounded like footsteps. Footsteps coming up from the basement. Allison yelled my name from the kitchen, panic already in her voice. And when I came down, she was standing frozen near the basement door, with her ear up to it, saying, "There's somebody down there." Another loud bang echoed beneath us, and adrenaline flooded through me instantly. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, one of my old golf clubs leaning beside the coat closet, and I slowly opened the basement door. The stairs creaked under my weight as I went down, and a smell hit me again, this time stronger and different, sweat and garbage and body odor. I called out, "Hey, who's down here?" There was no answer. I looked across the shelves and storage bins, and everything at first looked empty. And then I remembered the back storage closet. I hadn't checked that before, and now the door was slightly open. I stepped closer, gripping the golf club, and the closet set beneath the stairs and had always been used for old blankets and winter clothes, but I could hear something moving inside it now, and then I could hear the breathing. Before I could take another step, the door exploded outward, and a guy came flying out of the darkness, screaming incoherently. He slammed into me so hard we both crashed onto the concrete floor, and the smell coming off of this guy was unbearable. He was filthy and thin, covered in a tangled beard with these crazy, crazy eyes. He was clawing at my face and shrieking nonsense, and I swung the golf club blindly. The first hit caught his shoulder, but the second cracked against the side of his head with kind of a sickening sound. Then he just collapsed on top of me. For several seconds, I just lay there gasping beneath his weight, while Allison was screaming upstairs. Police arrived within minutes after she called 911, and officers came down and dragged the man out of the basement in handcuffs, and paramedics checked out a cut across my cheek where he'd scratched me. I don't even remember him doing that. What they found afterwards, though, terrified me even more than the encounter I had with him. This drifter had apparently been living in the basement for months. There were used blankets in that storage area, stolen food wrappers stuffed into walls, and another makeshift bed inside the closet, and dozens of empty cans. The detective believed that this guy had been sneaking upstairs while my mother was asleep or was just wandering confused throughout the house. The worst part was realizing Mom probably never understood someone else was even living there with her. Because of her dementia, she likely noticed things moving around and smelled strange, or convinced herself she'd simply forgotten something. Even now, years later, I still think about that man hiding beneath the house while my mother sat upstairs alone and completely unaware. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like me to narrate, email it to unclejosh.truescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you're catching this on YouTube and you like what you heard and saw, why not give the video a thumbs up, share it with a friend, leave a comment. I'd love to know what you thought of the stories. It's all free and it all helps out with the algorithms, so I appreciate it. Follow me on social media, and if you'd like to take your support a step further, find a link to my Patreon page in the description, and consider getting some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. A link to my TeePublic storefront is also in the description. Everyone, be excellent to each other, and until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything: a ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.